Hello, and a very warm welcome to the 2021 International Conference on Environmental, Cultural, Economic and Social Sustainability. I'm David Humphreys, and I'm Research and Network Chair for Common Ground's on Sustainability Community. I'm also Professor of Environmental Policy at the Open University in the United Kingdom. I'm delighted to welcome you to this annual gathering of scholars, activists, policymakers, business professionals and concerned citizens. This is the 17th annual conference we've held, and it's the first to be held online for the vast majority of participants, although some will be meeting in place at the Vries Universiteit in Amsterdam. And I'd like to thank this year's partner institution, the Amsterdam Sustainability Institute, a world-leading think tank on sustainability led by Professor Philip Patberg and colleagues, without whom this conference would not have been possible. We chose the conference theme, Accelerating the Transition to Sustainability, Policy Solutions to the Climate Emergency, because of the increasing urgency of the task that confronts us. When the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, published its 2018 report on the 1.5 degrees climate target, it estimated a remaining window of only 12 years until 2030 to establish effective climate change mitigation measures. There are now just 9 years left, according to this warning. We're now living in the Anthropocene, a new geological epoch where humans, we ourselves, are the dominant force for planetary change. Paul Crutzen is an atmospheric scientist credited with coining the term Anthropocene. Future generations will be able to find the traces of our civilization in the geological record. Plastics, radioactive isotopes, manufactured metal alloys, and so on. The Anthropocene should be seen as a no analog state. There is nothing that we can compare it with. The term denotes both our power and our impotence. Our power, because we've been able to transform the planetary biosphere without really wanting to, and our impotence, we seem unable to agree what now is to be done. Central to sustainability is the idea of intergenerational equity, fairness between generations. The expression in this cartoon, "all this will be yours," is usually used by parents to promise their children a positive inheritance, the family home, the car, and so on. But we're now passing on a degraded planet to our descendants. The worst consequences of our actions will fall upon the young and those who are still to be born. This conference will consider how we can discharge our responsibilities for our descendants through effective planetary stewardship that counters trends such as unsustainable urbanization, industrial agriculture, fossil fuels burning, and consumer culture. I often wonder what will be the history of the 21st century when it is finally written. Of the many public welfare challenges that we face, none is as urgent as planetary heating. This is the defining challenge of our age. None of us can insulate ourselves from its consequences, and the history of this century will be one of how we met this challenge. Will the history be that we knew our Earth was heating but didn't react in time? Or will the narrative be that although we left it late, we responded in time? We made the difficult changes to society, the economy and governance systems, and passed on to our children and descendants an ecologically stable planet. We won't write that history, but we can define the narrative with the actions that we take. That choice is ours to make. We've seen some terrible forest fires of late, including this burning home in Lake Congelon, New South Wales, Australia. 2020 was also one of the worst years for burning in the Amazon, Paraguay, Bolivia, and Peru, as well as Brazil. There were the first widespread forest fires in Siberia and unusually severe fires in the United States. 5 of the 10 worst forest fires in the history of California burned in 2020. So what changes to our systems of governance can we make? We have what political scientist Oren Young has called an Anthropocene Governance Gap. The old political systems are still in place, but they're unresponsive and not working. New political systems are not yet emerging, or not emerging fast enough. One option is to change our legal systems. I've been inspired by the rights of nature movement in South America, which holds that there are rights of Pachamama, rights of Mother Earth. Our most important duty on this view is to respect the earth, both from a moral standpoint, because it is right, and from an instrumental standpoint, because human rights flow from the earth, and only by respecting nature's rights can human rights, such as those to food, water and health, be fully realised. This is Evo Morales, then the President of Bolivia, speaking at the UN General Assembly in April 2009. Morales said that 60 years after the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it was time for a new generation of rights to be recognised, the rights of Mother Earth. Proponents of Earth jurisprudence argue that a river has the right to flow, species have the right to continue to exist and evolve in the wild. Earth jurisprudence is concerned not only with defining the rights of the natural world, equally importantly, it redefines the duties of people and their relationship with nature. On this view, environmental degradation arises from an anthropocentric hierarchy of rights, in which the rights of business and investors to property prevail over the rights of nature. The solution lies with inverting this hierarchy so that nature becomes paramount. So effective nature protection requires not tinkering with existing legal systems, but a foundational transformation of the law. Ecuador was the first country to include rights of nature in a constitution in 2008. Bolivia passed the law on the rights of Mother Earth in 2010. There's also been recognition of rights of nature at the sub-federal level in the United States, and with recognition of the rights of rivers in India and New Zealand, which gave these rivers legal standing in courts. Now, the question that we're considering at this conference on how we can accelerate the transition to sustainability has been complicated since we started organising the conference by the COVID-19 pandemic. There are various areas where sustainability studies intersect with the pandemic. The first concerns the relationship between anthropogenic environmental change and zoonotic viruses. The zoonotic disease is one caused when a pathogen jumps from one species to another. There have been warnings from both epidemiologists and conservationists that the risk of future epidemics of zoonotic diseases is high due to climate change and deforestation and other forms of habitat destruction that increase the risks of humans coming into contact with other species carrying disease. The 2014 Ebola outbreak in Africa is believed to have started with a boy in Guinea playing in a burnt out tree stump where fruit bats were roosting. Smallpox came from rodents, malaria from birds. Human society may have to deal with other pandemics this century if we do not arrest global environmental degradation. A second area concerns how nature has responded to the pandemic. The pandemic can be seen as a form of unplanned experiment. In what ways has the global ecosystem responded to vastly reduced movements of people and the steepest shutdown in economic activity since World War II? The short answer, unfortunately, is not enough to save the planet. Admittedly, the human ecological footprint has been reduced to a level not seen in decades. Flights worldwide have fallen by more than 50%. Seismologists have recorded lower vibrations from what they term cultural noise, tremors in the Earth's crust due not to geological factors, but to road and rail traffic, industrial mining, and so on. Around the world, there are likely to be thousands less people dying from air pollution. And the pandemic has reduced greenhouse gas emissions from industry, motorised transport, aircrafts and office buildings. Although emissions from homes have risen slightly, the International Energy Agency has admitted that for 2020 overall, the overall reductions of emissions on a global scale will be less than 8%. This is not enough to dent climatic warming. In the third week of January this year, the atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide, as measured by the Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii, was 414 parts per million. The figure for the equivalent week in 2020 was 413 parts per million. The scientifically accepted safe limit, by the way, is 350 parts per million. So we're well in excess of that. And the atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased during the pandemic. A third area concerns the prospects for recovery from the economic slowdown. There is only a narrow and rapidly closing window of opportunity for governments to introduce economic stimulus packages to promote a green economy. Will we take this opportunity? There's been much talk of a Green New Deal, a Keynesian economic package that would take its inspiration from Roosevelt's New Deal that used taxation and increased government expenditure to lift the US out of recession following the Wall Street crash. A Green New Deal would use fiscal policies to tax environmentally degradation activities and use government expenditure to subsidise the transition to a clean economy. Energy companies have made some impressive investments in wind-powered and solar energy, but businesses will invest only where the risks are relatively low and the likelihood of healthy profits is relatively high. That leaves a whole range of actions that are necessary to decarbonise the economy, but where the private sector will not venture. Only the state has the economic power to take the investment risks that businesses shy away from. If the Green New Deal is to secure broad social support, it cannot leave behind the workers whose livelihoods depend on the carbon economy. A low carbon economy needs a talented and motivated workforce for retrofitting the thermal insulation of energy inefficient buildings, increased investment in solar farms, wind turbine maintenance. Everyone should have a stake in a green tomorrow. If not, why would they vote for it? So what role is there for the state? As we know, John Locke, an early liberal political theorist, argued that there is a social contract between the state and its people, in which individuals agree to surrender to the state some rights in return for the security provided by the state. This early notion of a social contract was based on freedom from violence. Social democracy broadened the notion of social contract to include freedom from sickness, hunger, and homelessness, the right to education. The challenge of environmental degradation now demands a further redefinition of the social contract, with the state undertaking to protect its citizens from environmental harms. Indeed, one of the points made by the activist group Extinction Rebellion is that the government has broken its social contract to protect citizens by allowing climate change. It calls for a widening of the social contract to include environmental security. We should also recognise the big unexamined question: can we meet our growing energy needs with renewable energy sources? Or does solving climate change necessarily and unavoidably involve reducing our energy consumption? How many politicians ask that question? One alternative model that is attracting some attention is the work of Kate Raworth, an economist from the United Kingdom. She argues that in order to green the economy, it is necessary to fundamentally reconceive economic theory. Old economic theory is premised on ideas of industrial production and economic growth. Raworth argues that economic activity should take place only within an area that meets basic human needs. That's the social foundation, the inner ring in this diagram, but which doesn't lead to environmental degradation. That's the ecological ceiling, the outer ring in the diagram. In between is the safe and just space where economic activity should take place. Kate Raworth uses the planetary boundaries of Johan Rockström and colleagues, as shown in this slide. And it can be seen that we've already exceeded the planetary boundaries for climate change, biodiversity loss, land conversion, and the phosphorus and nitrogen cycles. Just serious. For the social foundation, there are serious shortfalls in all areas. For example, with respect to the absence of political violence, education for all, and security in water, energy, and food. At present, in different ways, we all inhabit social systems and structures that routinely lead to carbon emissions and environmental degradation. Climate change seems to be normalised into the way we all live our lives, but we have agency. Alternatives are possible and things can be different. We can use our research, our teaching, and our lives as citizens to press for infrastructural change. From the existing carbon-intensive infrastructures of oil wells, oil refineries, petrol stations, and motorised transport, to a low or no carbon infrastructure based on other energy sources, wind, solar, wave, and so on. Today, we can find no more important challenge with which to engage the environmental degradation. This conference will make an important contribution to addressing this most urgent of public welfare problems. Thank you to the Amsterdam Organising Committee, Philip Patborg, Sjoerd Kluving, Nicolene van der Griep, and Sipora Zotveller for making this conference happen. And thank you to you for caring about sustainability. Welcome to the gathering. I wish you an enjoyable, productive, and stimulating conference. Thank you.